I'm Aryeh Schwartz along with Rachel Galligan, and welcome to the Winsidr show where it's all about the W. The champs have been crowned, and the offseason has already started and hit full speed ahead. So let's dive in and discuss. If you like our show, please consider joining our Patreon community, patreon.com/Winsidr. For less than a cup of coffee a month, you can directly show support for the hard work we do covering the W. And don't forget to see our amazing staff's written content over at winsidr.com. That's winsidr.com. Okay, we're back. The season's done.
The
champs have been crowned. All right, before there's tons of off-season stuff to discuss. And we'll have a whole offseason to do that. But first and foremost, Vegas pulls off. Vegas is missing Chelsea Gray.
Right.
Vegas is missing, we can include Candace Parker in that. Vegas is missing Kia Stokes. So now you're missing the floor general. You're missing that
interior presence.
That interior presence, that size. Heck, a player who was hitting threes early in this series. Essentially everybody counted out the aces to a degree. And I think looking back, because we've had a little bit of time to reflect and react, I have some thoughts. My first thought is just kind of like Vegas basically said, like, we need to do it in this game. We can't let this go to game 5 because I think it was clear none of their players were coming back. And other players were injured and they were holding back injuries. So for me, it's just like Vegas basically said, like, today's the day. We got to do it now. Let's finish this. What was your reaction to Vegas pulling off the improbable win in Game 4?
I just think for me, it goes back to being kind of one of those really like memorable historical moments where like a team's will just kind of overpowers their, the circumstances at hand. We talk about Vegas and how tough this team is, how close this team is. And I keep saying it over and over. Vegas, they have that dog in them. They've got that chip in them. And that's from top to bottom, and the bench doesn't get hardly any credit, in my opinion. But like when it was time to rise to the occasion, from top to bottom, they were able to get that done. And I don't know that I necessarily like agree that we had to get it done right now. I'm surprised that New York wasn't able to pull out another win at home and force a Game 5. I think to me that was the more shocking thing, was just kind of like Vegas was like, screw it, we're going to do it now. I felt like had they gone back to Vegas and they played under the same circumstances, I don't think much would have necessarily changed. Maybe potentially Stokes. I'm not sure about that, but it just kind of was like, if we can, we're going to get it done right now, and we're going to do it on their home court and New York's home court, and we're just going to show that we're better. We're better from top to bottom, and we have that dog. We have that edge to us. We have that fire in us that honestly I didn't see out of New York in that final game, and that was the shocking thing to me. I really felt like New York would seize that moment better than they did, and again force a Game 5 because of the circumstances. Because of the depth, because of the obvious talent on New York's roster, but the toughness factor of Las Vegas, I think honestly, sometimes we shortchange how tough and how competitive and how that team can just bully people, and I mean that in the best possible way. And they did it. And I think that's what this game is about, right? Like, you're facing adversity. You've got players that have gone down. There's a lot of emotion. There's a lot of things at hand. Who's able to rise to the occasion? We saw, Sydney Colson step up big time in that game. Kayla George, in my opinion, stepped up big time in that game. The game plan that Vegas had was so strategic, and they were going to let her take as many shots as she possibly could take. And New York wasn't going to guard her. And she just kept going. She kept letting it fly. And it was so fascinating to watch because that was what she was told to do. And that was the game plan. They stuck to the game plan. They did things that they had never done before. They were able to implement different defenses and things that, a different look, obviously, that New York had ever seen. And they stuck to the game plan. They trusted the process, and it was enough. And I just think for me, just unbelievable performance of will from Vegas, from my perspective, from top to bottom. And Alicia Clark and Sydney Colson. And I mean, the entire unit rose to the occasion. And the fact that that was more than enough than a fully healthy New York Liberty team is shocking to me, And
I would almost say that, like, we always, it's cliche to say, but like we always talk about how the playoffs, like, it just reaffirms what we already knew about the teams in the regular season. Like, yes, there's times, right? The Chicago Sky, when they won their championship, where they go through this run. And like during the regular season, we're like, you're really hot, you're really cold. I feel like, for me personally, I feel like that game 4 so much came down to what we already knew about New York and what we already knew about Vegas. Vegas, like you've said, tough, dog, scratch, bite, claw, figure out any way to get the victory. Whereas New York, like, we can talk about their hot streaks, their cold streaks, whatever. If you ask me, the story of New York all season has been they allowed teams that shouldn't have been in the game to be in the game.
Mhm.
In New York, yes, like in head-to-heads with Vegas, they blew them out a few times, and New York had many blowout games. But there was tons of games that I saw in New York this season where it was just closer than it should have been. If you're going to be a quote-unquote super team, if you're going to be that top dog contender with Vegas, then I think, like, you can't have those games. I understand the flip side of the coin is, well, great teams find ways to win, but it almost felt like New York's weakness this year was allowing teams who honestly had no business being in close games late in the game against the would-be number one contenders to do that. And like, if I'm looking at this, if I'm a New York fan, and I know a lot of people are going to shame me for saying, like, I'm embarrassed. I'm sorry, like, maybe I'm being out there, whatever. Like, here's the thing. You have Chelsea Gray missing. You have Kia Stokes missing. Kayla George is beating you. Alicia Clark is beating you. That's not shade to Alicia Clark, 6 Woman of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, blah, 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 blah. Like, 3-time champion.
Right.
Like, Alicia Clark has as many championship rings as Candace Parker. Let's be clear. And you could argue, which I think is a fair argument at this point, has been more impactful in all 3 of those, because Candace Parker wasn't much of this year. But yeah, I guess kind of when you look at it from the New York perspective, like, okay, the Kelsey Plum line, right, about Candace Parker, or about New York not being a team. Obviously, I think, we can whatever, but I think there's truth to the general idea of what she's saying, which is teams don't just get built today and then go win a championship tomorrow. It takes time. It takes growth. It took Vegas time to grow. It took Chicago time to grow. Minnesota, LA, like, no team, Seattle, no team wins championships just like that. So yeah, sorry. What's your thoughts on New York? Like, is it embarrassing? Is it you just got punched in the face? Like, what is it?
I think it should be an element. If I'm New York, and I was talking about this before the season even started, I felt like New York it's a process to win a championship.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how many times, and not that it's impossible, but you compile this roster that has a ton of talent on it, but you've got to be able to go through some of those collective growing pains together. I mean, Vegas, we're talking about, they've won back to back. This is a dynasty in the making, if you will. We'll see what can happen in the future, but this is a team that has gone through a process together, even dating before Becky Hammon, back in those Bill Lambier days, and getting to the point where they were in the finals. Then they were contending for winning a championship. I feel like with New York, they should be pissed off. This should light a fire under a lot of people, not just on the team, but in the franchise, to like, okay, like we've got the tools to get here. Now we need that extra chip, that extra edge, that dog, sometimes when you have your heart broken, or you're even humiliated or embarrassed or feeling whatever types of ways, you might be feeling. I don't think, like, it was a great accomplishment for New York to get to the finals. That's great. I don't think that New York is cursed by any means. This is a team obviously on the rise. This is one of the top franchises in the WNBA, but they've got to go through a process of being able to now just not get to the finals. How do we win the finals? What's it going to take? And Vegas showed in that final game that edge, that chip, that dog, that grit, that determination that I don't think New York has fully developed yet. How do you get that? Well, I think a team a lot of times got to go through some heartache. So for me, I don't think this is necessarily a bad thing for, New York Liberty fans or even the franchise, moving forward. The sky isn't falling in. I think this is only going to propel this team in the future.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, I think both of us are right? Like, you can be embarrassed and pissed off and disappointed, but like you said, it needs to light that fire. It needs to drive them forward. It'll be interesting to see what New York is able to do this offseason in terms of bringing players back. I mean, look, Jonquel Jones, when Vegas is missing Kia Stokes and they still find a way to hold JJ to 3 for 8, 11 rebounds, 6 points, and just 3. Like, I am just beyond impressed by the determination. The buy-in of Vegas was just so impressive, so much fun to watch. Like, the whole time you're watching it and you're just like, is this actually happening?
Right.
Like, is this TV or is this real life? And I gotta say, just impressive, super, by far the lowest scoring game of the season when these two teams played. It's like the 10th game, 9th game they played. Just wild. Really, really impressive from A'ja Wilson. Just insane.
Oh my gosh.
Just, 24, 11 of 21, 16 rebounds, 1 block, 1 steal.
I mean, a complete, just sheer dominance. Deserves every little bit of the MVP. I mean, everything. It was poetic. It was absolutely poetic. A'ja Wilson doing A'ja Wilson things. We're in the middle of one of the greatest players we will ever get to see in the WNBA. And at her peak, and she ain't done yet. That's the craziest part.
Yeah, I mean, whatever. We can get into a whole discussion during the offseason of like, when is A'ja Wilson's peak and whatnot. I do want to say, shout out to the W. Those new trophies, I'm digging them.
They look good.
They look good. They look real good. Good branding on the bottom, bigger, cooler. Honestly, looked like players actually had to work to lift them up versus like the other ones looked like they were hollow, cheap, and fake. But there's been some other news. Like, we could talk more about the finals, but I feel like we got to talk about kind of the more, off-season, the big headlines that are happening currently. The Mercury hire Nick Tibbs as the new head coach of the Phoenix Mercury. Comes from a mediocre career. I'm just going to be blunt here. A mediocre career. The reason I'm saying mediocre is he's been an assistant coach in the NBA for bad teams. So the nicest thing I can say is a mediocre career so far as an assistant coach in the NBA. Personally, and I think this was shown again with Teresa Witherspoon and whatnot, but I think there is a very dangerous precedent. People can disagree with me, whatever. It's my podcast. I'm going to say it. I think there's a very dangerous precedent being set right now in the WNBA. I am all for paying insanely high contract prices to the coaches and to the GMs. My issue is the current trend seems to be that just working for an NBA team, not NBA success, but working for an NBA team provides you a demand for a much higher paycheck, or that for a WNBA coach to make, top billing as a coach, they would have to work in the NBA for a period of time. I do not like that at all. You have people like Cheryl Reeve, who are some of the most successful in WNBA history, who are not making anywhere near these coaches who have never had any success as a head coach. I understand we had talked about this for a while and there's a lot of back and forth. And like, look, I'm all for raising the price tag of coaches. I just wish NBA coaching wasn't kind of the check mark you need to get $1 million. That's all.
No, I'm with you. I totally agree. We will talk about Phoenix ad nauseum during this offseason, which I'm excited about because there's a lot to talk about. But I will say it's interesting. Clearly, we've seen NBA trends in the WNBA in the past. This isn't anything new. The best thing about this is the fact that it's raising the bar in terms of pay in the league. And that's what I'll leave it at, I guess.
Best thing, only good thing, whatever. Probably. But best luck. I'm excited to see how this new coach who has no experience coaching the W or women's basketball in any way, shape, or form.
He is a girl dad.
He's a girl dad. And supposedly his dad coached women's basketball at some point in high school or something like that. So he's clearly properly prepared for this. Chicago Sky hired Teresa Witherspoon as head coach, and I'm going to butcher his name, Jeff Pagliocci, as the GM. I apologize for butchering the name. Thoughts on that? I mean, me personally, I'll be blunt. Maybe I'm stealing Rachel's thunder here, but like, hope Teresa Witherspoon works out in Chicago. Still have a lot of questions for the Chicago front office. And I'm not as hyped. I think everyone kind of blindly just gets on the hype train of a former player becoming a head coach. And from my understanding, again, don't follow the men's league, don't know much. My understanding is everyone's highly regarding her because as a coach because of what she's done with Zion. And from my again understanding of not watching the men's league, he hasn't really played. So I don't get that. But I'm open to being wrong, right?
I think it's a really good hire for a franchise like Chicago. I mean, they still feel like they're behind the 8 ball in so many ways, shape and form, but they're trying to make the moves in terms of new investment, new potential facilities, finally adding, an individual GM role. They were the last ones that didn't have that role. I mean, they have to do those things, or else how far behind are you to the franchises like in New York or Las Vegas at this point? So
team's now working out in a rec center.
I feel like it was just a matter of time before we saw Witherspoon back in the league, and I think you have the former player. Hey, at least she knows the WNBA.
Yes,
at least she knows women's basketball.
Well, that's the thing, right? We can debate her, like we can debate aspects of her coaching and like what she knows, if she's going to be good or not. With Mercury, it's kind of like,
well, no, even in the presser, he's like, well, I'm going to really rely on everybody to help me know this league. It's like so bluntly like real. I'm like, okay.
I appreciate the bluntliness, but like, what the hell was Mercury ownership thinking? And like, what did he say in the interview process that got him this job? That's my question.
Well, you've got NBA guys at the front office and from top to bottom, and they're going to bring in their people. That's hiring anywhere. But again, to be determined if that works out. But back to Witherspoon. I mean, I think it's a good hire for Chicago. I'm anxious to see how this works out. I am nervous for Chicago in the near future. Clearly, their lack of draft assets and things like that are going to put them in a difficult situation. And then, how are you going to beat out people in free agency is what it's going to have to come down to. And that's, again, another question. But, they're making some moves and they're doing their best to kind of keep up with the Joneses here. So to be determined, but I do like, I like the hire in terms of just a familiar face, a historical name, a legend in the game, and just getting that opportunity and seeing what she can do with it.
Yeah, I'm excited. Look, whether or not I think this will be successful, I'm excited that more former players are in coaching positions. And the last most important topic, arguably, right now we know Golden State, Oakland/San Francisco. I guess they're not even calling it Golden State; it's the Bay Area. Has a team for expansion 2025. It was widely expected, widely predicted, widely thought that Portland, so 2 West Coast teams, was going to be the other one. You have a billionaire who owns a giant, company, was going to buy the team. Nike's there. There's all these other things. It's going to work out great. Well, falls through the other day. Kathy sends a letter to government employees saying that it was the facilities that caused them to back away. Ownership said, what are you talking about? You've known that was going to be an issue this whole time. From my understanding, it seems like it came down to the name and stupid, little things like that, which is just dumb, in my opinion. At the end of the day, if the W moved away from Portland, you would hope that means they have another place closely waiting to step up. But that said, it sounds like they don't. Yeah. But it sounds like they already told all the other places, hey, we're not going with you. We're going with Portland. And then in the 11th hour, they said, Portland, sorry, no, we're moving on. And so now I started, like, I've never had a lot of faith in ownership in the league and in the commissioner in the league. I've even less now because you're pulling the rug out. What are we doing for 2025? We're already behind. What's the answer? Are we playing with 13 teams moving forward for the foreseeable future?
Yeah. I mean, that's the part that's concerning. When something falls apart this late is shocking. Like, this is like a bad breakup. there's nothing positive about this, at least from an outsider's perspective, and when millionaire prospective owner Kirk Brown basically was like, sounds like to me he just kind of got pissed off and was like, screw it, I'm out. Like, does that burn? Is this repairable? Are you able to now bring in another, mega owner who has the resources to do this, or is Portland like off the table for the foreseeable future? It sounds like people are scrambling trying to make this work, but like that's a huge hit. And again, it's just the way it went down with Kathy's letter, blaming it on the facilities, which has been known from the start of this process. But it sounds like to me, this really came down to just kind of last second disagreements and maybe just couldn't work well together. And Kirk Brown just being like, you know what, this is not something I want to continue to invest my money in anymore. So I don't know. To be determined. Clearly, there's a lot that we're going to find out the next couple of months. I'm sure the league is highly motivated to try and get this to 14. But you also can't just piece that together, at the last second. Does it end up just being 13? I'm not sure but that was a really big development the other day because, clearly all eyes looked at Portland, had it together, and they were going to get this done. I think they even talked about preparing an announcement.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of shocking and jarring news, and all eyes on kind of Kathy Engelbert now, like, okay, how do we repair this situation and what's your strategy moving forward?
Yeah. And last thing I'll say is, to me, facilities is a BS thing. We have teams that are working out in rec centers. At the end of the day, if the ownership is going to make a long-term commitment and commit to building, I don't care about the first 2 years of the team. Yeah. I care about 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 and on. That's what I care about. So that's what I want. Denver's invested. Rachel, real quick, logging out for the 2023 season. Next time you hear us, it will be part of the 2023-2024 offseason. Rachel, who's your GOAT?
Pickle.